Diffusing is critical if you want to achieve more defined curls at the root, more root lift and volume. But what if you diffuse and your curls end up being a flat, frizzy mess? Well, I'm going to show you exactly how to diffuse for beginners, step by step, including how to achieve more root definition and volume without a bunch of frizz. My name is Gina and welcome back to my channel. Here we talk all things naturally curly. I love simplifying things, doing step-by-step tutorials, and helping you problem solve with your curls. So let's get started with the styling routine and then we will diffuse. There are a few super important things that we need to cover before you begin diffusing. You first want to prep your hair with a heat protectant. So I'm applying the Curlsmith Miracle Shield to damp hair. This is not only going to protect your hair from the heat when we're diffusing, but also from UV rays, chlorine, and much more. I have been using a heat protectant consistently for a while now, and it's definitely made a big difference. I don't notice any split ends, and I do touch my diffuser head to the ends of my hair. A lot of people say not to, but I love doing that for the result that I get, and I don't get any split ends. I always check, I pay close attention to my hair. So you're actually supposed to use this after any leave-in conditioners and before any styling products, but I totally messed up today out of habit. I applied it first, but ideally you would do leave-in, then heat protectant, then curl cream or gel or whatever stylers you're going to use. Step number 2, which is completely optional, just if you need more moisture, you can go in with a lightweight curl cream or a leave-in conditioner. This leave-in actually helps to reduce dry time, which is why I wanted to go with this today. This is the Curlsmith Weightless Air Dry Cream. This leave-in conditioner is highly moisturizing, but it's also really lightweight as well. That's why I wanted to feature it. And because it is so lightweight and because of the properties in the product, it does help to cut down on the dry time. I noticed that my hair starts to dry really fast, like it'll air dry as I'm styling. So I always make sure to re-wet my hair as I'm styling so it doesn't start to dry when I'm using this leave-in conditioner. If your curls are not drying with a crunchy cast, or if they end up very frizzy after you scrunch out the cast, then your gel does not provide enough hold. This is the biggest reason why people end up with frizz when they're diffusing, is because they don't have enough hold in their hair before diffusing. I would not be able to do the diffusing techniques that I do if I didn't use a styling product like a gel or a mousse that gives me enough hold. I would definitely end up with frizz because I do touch the diffuser to my hair, and I'll show you how I do that in just a bit. But the Shape Up Aqua Gel from Curlsmith is actually more of a medium hold. I'm pretty heavy-handed with it though, so I actually get a pretty good cast out of this. I initially thought it was a light hold gel, that's how it's labeled, but I'm able to get more of a medium hold out of it. I wanted to go with the Shape Up Aqua Gel for this video because I wanted a little bit more volume and a softer look, and the more hold that you have, you might reduce your volume a little bit. You're gonna get more definition and longer lasting results, but ideally you want something that gives you a cast and that your hair will not frizz up as soon as you scrunch out that cast. That's how to prevent frizz when you're diffusing. I will also link other gel options that do not cause frizz while diffusing on the blog post that goes with this video. That will be linked in the description box down below, because that's the main thing I look for when it comes to gels, is something where I can touch my hair with my diffuser, with my hands, and it doesn't frizz up immediately. So I did my usual styling routine, which just includes a little bit of brush styling. I'm not doing a ton of brush styling on the bottom section because I don't want to overclump the curls. And then the top section, I do a little bit more precise styling just to help tame frizzy and stringy areas. So after I'm done styling, I like to scrunch my hair with a hair towel to speed up dry time. This is really going to soak up that excess water. And it is important to do this step if you do like to style soaking wet. So I styled more on the damp side, like I didn't have too much water in my hair when I was applying my products. But if you do like to style soaking wet, where your shirt is getting wet or your hair is dripping, you definitely have to do this step. You do not want to go in and diffuse hair that is soaking wet. It's going to take forever. It's more damaging on the hair, and you're going to be sitting under a diffuser for hours on end. So scrunch it out with a hair towel, and then for extra hold, glaze in a light layer of gel on top. This is key for adding more hold, especially if you're someone that does like to style soaking wet. It will just dilute your gel and you won't get much hold, even if you're using a strong hold gel. But this step of adding in an extra layer of gel after microplopping is going to make a big difference in the amount of hold that you have. So when it comes to dry time, the main reason I'm able to dry up my curls in about 10 to 12 minutes is because I damp style. I don't style soaking wet, and because my hair is pretty thin, I have low density hair, and because I do this microplopping step. So all of those factors help to speed up your dry time because you don't want to be diffusing forever. Now that I'm done styling my hair, I'm ready to go straight to diffusing. I usually recommend going right to diffusing versus letting your hair air dry first, because that's going to result in a more elongated look. Now, if that is what you're going for and you do want to elongate your curls, then you could air dry some first, because your hair is going to start to set and dry in the shape that it is while it's drying. So if I'm just sitting here like this air drying, the curls are a little bit weighed down from the product and the water and just from natural gravity. Another method is to plop first with a hair towel. That's just where you put all of your hair up in a towel on top of your head before you diffuse, but I don't really recommend this technique very often because a lot of times it can just smush your roots, and it will also press your wet hair with product into your scalp and therefore getting your styling products on your scalp, which is not what you want. Our hair is in its weakest state when it's wet, so we really want to minimize the amount of time that our hair is wet. I would rather get it dried right away, especially if you're trying to really enhance the curl shrinkage and the definition and the volume in your hair. You're going to have more control over that if you go straight to diffusing. This is just a bonus step, but I wanted to try out the Curlsmith Root Boosting Spray again, but not with the rest of the volume line, to see if it helps with my root volume. And so I just put a little bit on my hands. I also misted some on my roots before I started diffusing. Ideally, I would have added this though before I started styling and stuff. I promise we're about to start diffusing, but I did want to show you the diffuser that I use. So this is the Curlsmith Defrizzion hairdryer with the XXL diffuser attachment. So the settings that I typically use for most of my diffusing routine are the high heat setting and the low speed setting. Sometimes I will switch to the medium heat towards the end, but this hairdryer dries my hair in under 15 minutes without using super hot heat. Like, the highest heat setting on this Defrizzion is not near as hot as a lot of hair dryers like the Dyson, which I don't usually recommend because I think that gets way too hot for the curls. But the Curlsmith hairdryer can still dry the hair fast because of this super large diffuser head. So I know you guys are gonna think I'm crazy, and sometimes this does hurt my neck, but I only do it for a few minutes. So the hover technique is really the best way to avoid frizz and damage because the diffuser is not actually touching the hair. Only using the hovering technique though will dry your hair in a more elongated position. So to prevent that, I like to plop my hair over a flat surface, or sometimes I will gently cup it in my hands so that way it starts to dry in the scrunch position. The bonds in our hair set when our hair starts to dry, so it's going to set in whatever position it is when it's in the drying process. So that's why you want it to be plopped over a surface if you are going to hover. So doing this step first will help prevent frizz because you're able to set the cast while it's still in the plop position without actually touching the hair. So usually I will just hover for a few minutes until I feel the cast begin to form. I don't like to let it form completely though and start to dry all the way because I do still want to diffuse in the upright position to really be able to scrunch the underside all the way up to the roots. However, if you're really trying to prevent frizz and you're really worried about damage, you could do the hovering method the entire time if you want. But if you want shrinkage, just make sure you're plopped over a surface or kind of cupping your hair with your hands. Then I like to flip right side up and focus on cupping the hair in the diffuser and pressing the hair all the way up to the root. You want to pay close attention to how the hair gets scrunched into the bowl if you're prone to wonky curls. So those are those curls that dry in a weird shape that's not your natural curl pattern, like kind of zigzag. You can't totally avoid this, and some curls are just naturally like that, especially if you still have damage in your hair, but you want to avoid it happening in your diffuser if possible. Don't hold your diffuser too long either because we want to gradually dry all areas around the same time versus fully drying one section and then moving on to another. This will also help prevent wonky curls. So that way you're just kind of going between sections and you're getting them a little bit dry, then moving on to another one a little bit dry. So that way everything's drying a little bit more evenly. I hope that makes sense. A little tip to prevent frizz is to point your diffuser towards your head once you scrunch it all the way up to your scalp versus keeping your diffuser pointed straight up. So this can reduce frizz because the air is blowing in like towards your head and not straight up, because if the air is blowing up the cuticle in the opposite direction, that is going to create frizz. I also make sure to get the underside because I'm really prone to stringy curls along the bottom hemline of my hair, especially when I'm due for a haircut. So this is why diffusing upright some will help you reach the back areas versus
diffusing upside down the entire time. I do like to flip upside down some to help get root volume, but I really don't recommend diffusing upside down the entire time because then you're not really getting the back curls. You'll notice the back of your hair and the underside layer is more elongated because it's kind of coming over the back of your head as you're upside down. You're not able to really get that hair scrunched all the way up to the root. Another tip to create more root volume is to flip the hair side to side when you're upright to help create more lift right at the roots. The Curlsmith hairdryer also has a kickstand on it, which allows for hands-free diffusing. I totally forgot to show you that when I was plopped over the counter, but it does have little prongs on the end near the vent area that allow you to just kind of prop it up if you do want to diffuse upside down. Once I'm happy with the shrinkage throughout the lengths of my hair, I start to focus more on the root area. I find it easier to create root lift when your roots are just damp and not soaking wet. You just want to place the prongs of the diffuser right at the roots, lift it up, and then hold for a bit. This is why I always recommend diffusers that have prongs that extend out past the end of the rim. This not only dries the roots faster because the air is actually going straight to the scalp, but it lifts the hair up and away from the scalp as it dries. This diffuser also has holes in the prongs which allow the air to reach the scalp. Some diffusers don't, so that is something that you need to check for. You can play around with the order of the techniques that you use to diffuse. It doesn't make a huge difference, but I do find it helps to switch around throughout your diffusing routine. So I don't always do the exact same steps in this particular order. But one thing to keep in mind is the amount of time that the ends of the hair are exposed to heat. So the ends are the most fragile and prone to split ends and frizz, so you want to avoid over diffusing your ends. This is why a lot of people like to first start diffusing their ends and then focus on the root area, so that way they're not touching the ends the entire time. So you'll notice towards the end of the routine, I'm not really getting the ends in the diffuser very much. I'm really just focusing on the top section. But fortunately, since I have a good gel in my hair, it's not going to cause frizz. Do you all see the difference in the root volume? When I diffuse directly at my roots using the prongs, I get so much more volume and more definition and just tighter curls at the root. If you're really struggling with your roots being straight, this technique can help, but please keep in mind that some people just naturally have straighter roots and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not necessarily something that you need to fix. Sometimes it's just normal for the curl pattern to start further down the hair shaft. But if you do naturally have curls at the root and they're not really coming out, it could be your diffusing technique, and air drying is definitely something that will elongate the roots. So this definitely makes a big difference and you can really see it in my before and after.
Now my hair is dried and I like to usually let this sit for a little bit to cool off and to finish setting before I go in and scrunch out the crunch. You don't have to do this, especially if you're short on time and you want your hair to be done right away. You can go ahead and scrunch out the cast, but if you do have time to leave the cast in, it is better to just let it kind of cool off and set and maybe finish air drying if it is still a little bit damp in some areas. It can be kind of hard to tell where it's still damp when it is warm. You kind of have to wait for your hair to cool off to be able to actually feel if there is any dampness. It's really hard to tell, but the reason you want to wait is because you don't want to scrunch out the cast while your hair is still wet. That can definitely lead to frizz because you're disturbing hair that is still damp. But sometimes I've done it before and it's totally fine. I will usually finish off with diffusing, but for the most part, I try and let it set. If you do really want maximum frizz control, or if you're going to be outside or going to bed, or maybe you're going to be out in humidity, then leave the cast in and it will gradually release throughout the day. And if you are going to be diffusing your hair at night before bed, leave the cast in to protect your curls while you're sleeping, and then you can scrunch it out the next morning, or it may kind of dissolve throughout the night on its own. Another tip is if you're short on time and you don't feel like you have time to diffuse, but you do want to try it out, just diffuse for about 5 minutes or until you feel the cast start to set and you're happy with the curl shape, and then you can finish air drying, because diffusing does help to set that curl shape because it dries your hair faster in the cast, whereas with air drying, the hair is more disturbed throughout the drying process. It is a quick way to just get that shape set in the way that you want it and then just go ahead and finish air drying if you do need to run out the door. But it is important, if you are going to finish air drying or if you're only air drying, to be careful to not go out in humidity or in high wind, because that's really going to disturb the curls when they're still fragile, when they're wet. And you also want to avoid like a ton of friction while it is in that drying process. So that includes rubbing against your shirt, sweaters, back of your headrest in your car, purses and handbags and stuff. Anything like that will really disturb the curls and you'll end up with a bunch of frizz if your hair is still damp. So I will usually let this set for anywhere from 5 to 20 or 30 minutes. Sometimes I'll go eat lunch, I'll finish getting ready, and then I will come back and scrunch out the crunch and finish off filming. So now I'm ready to fluff and scrunch out the crunch. I surprisingly get a pretty good cast with the Shape Up Aqua Gel. Even though it is listed as a light hold gel, I get more of a medium to firm hold, but it does really soften up when I scrunch out the cast, so I consider it like a medium hold gel. I'm definitely heavy-handed with it, which is probably why I get a really good cast with it, and I don't style super soaking wet, so I do end up with more of a cast. I also just like to have my hands be dry when I scrunch out the cast. I usually don't use an oil. You can use an oil if you really want to lock in moisture and add shine, or if you have a cast that you just can't scrunch out, that's when I will use an oil. And in the winter time, but in the summer, I'm really trying to preserve the most amount of hold as possible. So that's why I don't usually go in with an oil in the summer. Sometimes I do, but I'm going to skip it today because my hair is soft enough and it has plenty of shine. You also want to make sure that your hands are dry when you're touching dry hair. If they are wet, it's going to cause frizz when you touch your dry hair. You can also finish off with a hairspray at this point if you want to just tame some flyaways and add extra hold. A lot of times I will do that with this routine, but it feels pretty good. I wanted to show you how I filled in my curly hair tracker and planner for this routine. If you didn't already know, I do have this available for download on my blog. I will put the link down below if you're interested in picking it up, but you basically can log exactly what you did on that wash day, which different styling techniques that you used, what products you used, and then how did your results turn out? What was the weather like that day? Did you like your results? And then you can look back and see exactly what you did on the wash days when you did really like your results. You could even make note of the diffusing techniques that you use. If you're still experimenting with diffusing, this is a great way to figure out what works for you. I'll also include the link to the shop page on my blog, which includes all of the products that I recommend. You can sort and filter the products based on your hair's needs, including diffusers and other tools that I recommend. If you're in the market for a new diffuser and you're not sure which one is right for you, maybe you're not sure if the Curlsmith one is worth it, I've actually done a diffuser comparison that I will link for you right here on the screen. I compare the Dyson, the Curlsmith one, the Shark, and a couple of others that I own. I even break down the differences between the temperatures, my dry time with all of them, and I talk about why I don't really think the Dyson is worth it and why it's probably not right for you, especially with the high price point. So I will talk to you over in that video. Bye everyone.